When you first get a chameleon, you're concerned about husbandry, caging, feeders, and these are all very important. But there's one thing that you don't want to forget when you're starting off with chameleons, and that's to find a veterinarian that can see your chameleon. And this is the last thing that you want to wait on, because finding one may not be as simple as a Google search. Today I'm joined by Dr. Tom Greek, who is a chameleon veterinarian, and he talks about how you can be the ideal client and how you can partner with him to give your chameleon a long and healthy life. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tom Greek to the Panther Chameleon Podcast. Welcome, Dr. Tom Greek, to the Panther Chameleon Podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
All right, so what we would like to do is introduce someone who's totally new to Panther chameleons, maybe just got their first Panther chameleon, to their relationship to a veterinarian that can work with their chameleons. And perhaps we'll start off with, how does a veterinarian become a chameleon veterinarian?
Well, when we graduate from school, we are licensed to work on every animal species in the world except one. And that's people. So from there, we usually limit our practice to what really interests us. And so it might be someone who wants to do nothing but horses, or somebody who does nothing but cows. Somebody like me, I love working on dogs and cats, but my real fun is the exotics. And so you pick and choose what it is that you want to limit your practice to. The thing is, not a lot of veterinarians like working on reptiles. So sometimes you have to do your research to try and figure out who does them and who does them on a regular basis. So they're going to be up on everything that's going on.
Okay, so it sounds like this is something that we should do before we need the vet.
Absolutely. It's ideally you want to have a name of maybe even a couple vet places near you that if you need them right away, you can give them a phone call and know that they're going to be the right people. The last time that you want to be looking for a vet is when it's an emergency and you have nowhere to go and you're busy calling all over the place trying to find somebody.
Okay, so when's a good time to start looking for a vet?
Potentially even before you get your first chameleon. When you're doing all your research to find out how to take care of them properly, watching podcasts like this to know what you need to do, on that list, find a veterinarian should be on there.
Okay, well, what do we look for in a vet? I mean, we just typed in veterinarian on Google. We get a lot of names, but what should we look for?
The one thing that you may want to try is if you've got a reptile shop close to you that you trust, find out who they use, because they have invested in all their stock and all their animals. They want to take the best care. Chances are if one of them gets sick, they're going to take it to a local veterinarian. Give them a call, find out who their favorite veterinarian is, or a couple different veterinarians, and have those numbers ready. Otherwise, just doing a Google search on veterinarians, you may or may not find all the ones that you're looking for that do reptiles.
Well, as popular as reptiles, chameleons are, why is it harder to find vets that work with them?
In school, while we get some training in reptiles, it's a lot more fun to go to somebody that is as fascinated about them as you are. So for somebody like me, I got my first snake when I was 5 years old. I've been keeping them ever since then. So I've been a keeper for a lot longer than I've been a veterinarian. And in my case, I've been a veterinarian for a long time. So you're looking for somebody who has the experience, has the desire, wants to learn more, not just somebody who is sort of applying what they know in other species and just saying, okay, I'm going to try it on this chameleon. But again, if that's all you've got, I have communicated with veterinarians across the country where someone said, look, I'm out in the middle of Montana. There are no other veterinarians out here that will even see reptiles. Can you walk me through this procedure? And okay. I had one veterinarian that I helped her spay a veiled chameleon. She worked on lots of other species, but there was no other choice. It was either her or this animal was going to die. Mm-hmm. Walked her through how to do it. It came out successful. Everybody was happy at the end.
All right. Chameleons are pretty specific, and we know it's very difficult for veterinarians to be good at all reptiles because all the reptiles are different. Bearded dragons, turtles, and chameleons, totally different. But even within chameleons, you have a wide range. how in the world can a vet actually be effective with a chameleon?
I mean, to be honest, there are species that come into even my practice that I've never seen before, where you're going to say, hey, there's only a few of these that are in the country. A lot of the concepts I'm going to have on other species, I'm going to apply to the species that I've never seen before. So while the variations in care, whether it's a montane versus desert versus tropical species, there is going to be enough crossover that we can be successful and try and figure out what's going on, try and help your sick animal.
Okay. All right. Now, say we get our chameleon and we find a vet that we're thinking, okay, we've got a good match here. Is it worthwhile to bring that chameleon in for a wellness visit when you first get them?
If this is your first chameleon, you've never had, unlike somebody like yourself that's looked at thousands and thousands of chameleons, you may not know those little subtle signs that we would know looking at them. So it can be worthwhile when you get your brand new animal to get it checked out. That's a way we can look at it, look for any injuries, look for any bone problems, maybe do a fecal looking for parasites. But we've got the experience and expertise to find those little subtle changes that you may not notice simply because you just haven't seen as many as we have. So it can be money well spent.
Okay. Well, once we get it home, we're talking about a person who is new to chameleons. How would we know when it's time to bring that chameleon into the vet?
Knowing when it's sick, the very best thing that you could do is spend time with your animals. Know what is normal. Do your own physical exams. Pick them up. Look at them. Everything should be symmetric. What's on the right side should be on the left side. And if you see a weird bump, look on the other side. Is there a similar bump? The more that you look at them, the more you handle, the more you open up their mouth and look everywhere, you'll be able to recognize what is normal. And the goal is that if there's something abnormal, you're going to pick up on it right away while we still have time to fix it. Unlike, you don't want to necessarily wait until your chameleon's sitting at the bottom of the cage on its side. By then, we may not be able to bring him back. But if you know that he's usually active at a certain time of day, or he's usually sleeping at a certain time of day, or every time you walk in, he immediately hides behind a bush or comes running out looking for food, you know your animal better than anybody else. So the more time that you can spend watching them, handling them, observing for problems, and picking up on it right away, the better chance you're going to have of, say, keeping this guy alive. And when you notice something, try and get him in right away.
Yeah, and let's talk about noticing something. We know that chameleons are very subtle. They like to hide when they've got a problem. And we know that problems start small. And sometimes by the time we know unmistakably that there is a problem, it may be too late. So do we just go with our gut feeling to bring them in?
It's probably the best way to go. The tough part is, and this happens in human medicine as well, by now we've been around long enough, we probably had some friends in the past, and they were doing great up until the day that they got sick. And the same thing with our pets. They can be doing absolutely fantastic until the one day that we notice that our dog has a basketball-sized tumor in his abdomen. We never noticed any of the signs, never showed anything. So unfortunately, that is part of life where we may not pick up on those real subtle cues. But if you notice something and you're worried, get them checked out. Better to have them checked out. Everything is 100% normal. That way you're going to sleep better and know that your animal is okay, as opposed to waiting until it's too late.
Yeah, I say the absolute best thing the veterinarian could tell me was that I wasted my time bringing them in, because it's really not a waste of time. When you react to something, just something feels off, that's the time that it can actually be treated. And I just bring them in.
It's always good news to tell somebody that their pet's healthy.
Yes. So what would make an ideal client? And so we're talking to somebody who may have never been to an exotic vet before. What can they do beforehand, and what information could they bring to you so that they would be the, quotes, ideal client?
Well, the best is to take pictures of your setup. Let us know what you're feeding. The husbandry is such a huge part of preventative care when it comes to medicine and chameleons. I want to know how you've got everything set up. So if you can show pictures of your cage, your lighting, your heating, what food you're feeding, as much detail as you possibly can, that is extremely helpful for us. And those observations that you've made, boy, he skipped meals on these days. The more details that you know, the better. What we don't necessarily like is somebody who spent a lot of time on Dr. Google and comes in with a bunch of handouts and says, this is what my chameleon has, when oftentimes they're not necessarily correct. So let us do our job. But the very best thing that you could do is be as anal of an owner as you can to know all those little details.
Well, along those lines, we know that chameleons will hide as much illness as possible. And so it's very easily that we could have the situation where we see the chameleon just slow down and close its eyes during the day. And I go on to Chameleon Academy and they tell me that's not a good sign. But when I bring him to you, he's all hyped up in the office on adrenaline, and so he's not closing his eyes at all. How do you deal with a situation like that?
That's where I tell the people is I get to see them for 15 minutes, but I trust what they observed at home. So if I did a physical exam and everything came back, looked 100% normal, but you're seeing something at home, then we start talking about some other options. Typically, it's doing some sort of testing, whether it is a blood panel, whether it's a fecal, whether it's an x-ray, something that's going to give us a little more detail on what's going on other than what I'm seeing or feeling during that physical exam.
Okay.
But I'm really going to trust those owners that of what they are seeing at home. Sometimes it is, the environment. One thing that we'll see a lot is when the weather starts changing. And we'll start seeing slow down a little bit because it's getting colder and your house is getting colder. And we don't think about that because we've got the same heater on day in, day out, but you're going to get those ups and downs inside that room unless it's completely isolated or you've got it heated and cooled exactly the same every single day, but they will feel those fluctuations at night when it gets colder. And sometimes those are the little subtle things that the owners may not think about, that, wow, maybe he's slowing down because we've just got a cold spell this past 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And they may be slowing down because of that. So there's so many factors that can go into why my chameleon is unfortunately acting off.
So how successful is treating chameleons?
Just like anything, it really depends on how far advanced those problems are. So if you're getting a small abscess, a mild respiratory infection, mild weight loss, mild soft bones, all these things potentially are reversible. With the proper medications, we can get them back onto to being healthy again. The farther along they are, the poorer chances. The egg-bound chameleon that laid 2 eggs and hasn't laid any more eggs in 2 weeks and has been sitting on the bottom of the cage not eating or drinking the entire time. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a much more difficult animal for me to bring back than somebody who brought it in 2 or 3 days later after it stopped laying eggs. Then we're going into the surgery big, fat, healthy, as opposed to sickly, dehydrated, wanting to die no matter what we do.
All right. Well, we know that chameleons are very good with their calendar, and so they'll hatch right before we go on vacation, and they will have a prolapse Saturday night.
Absolutely.
What do we do in an emergency situation when our normal vet is closed?
There are emergency vets out there that do see exotics. Now, they may not be as experienced as the person that sees them every single day during the daytime, but they should be experienced enough to help keep your animal alive until you can get them to your regular veterinarian as soon as possible. What I usually tell people is that if you went in on a Saturday night for an emergency and that veterinarian wasn't able to keep your chameleon alive, chances are, had I seen it that night, I wouldn't have been able to keep it alive either. So, unfortunately, we are dealing with living beings. They are going to get sick someday. They are going to die someday. It's just our job to try and keep them as healthy as we possibly can for as long as we possibly can. So have that, like we talked earlier, as far as knowing the reptile veterinarians in your area, find out what emergency veterinarian in your area will see exotics. Because the tough part is the guy that's working on Friday night who will see your chameleon may not be working on Saturday night. So you may have to have a couple different places that are in your bag to jump at it if you need it.
Now, is that the list of possible places? Is that something that our exotic vet would be able to give to us?
Usually. But again, for me, I know there's a lot of emergency practices here in Southern California, and say, unfortunately, I don't know who's working what nights, but it's having that list of phone numbers so that, okay, Friday at 11, call emergency hospital A. Nope, you can't see him tonight. Okay, emergency hospital B. And you just work your way down that list until they finally say, yeah, we got someone who'll see chameleons, get them in here.
Okay. So what kind of things do you see chameleons come into your practice with?
Still, the majority of what we're seeing are husbandry related, especially with newer keepers than people have been doing it for a long time. And the stores and the breeders are getting better and better at getting the new owner set up with all the proper equipment, teaching them how to feed properly, the right lighting, the right supplements. It's gotten so much better than it was for me 30 years ago. But still, there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on where the UV light broke and we just didn't get around to getting a new one. Or the heat and light, we just, it was 110 outside. We didn't turn the air conditioning on, but we left our heat lamp up on top and we ended up getting burns. So there's things like that can always happen with somebody who is relatively new and doesn't know where the mistakes are. A lot of us that have been doing this for a long time, the reason why we think about those mistakes, because somewhere in the past we made them. Mm-hmm. We didn't do it correctly. We had a problem. We realized what we did wrong and turned around and fixed it. So now we're trying to get that information out to everyone else so you don't have to go through the same mistakes that we did. So I'll admit it, and anybody who's been doing this for a long time, if they tell you they didn't ever have problems with sick animals, they're lying to you. We've all had it happen. We've all had them get sick. But the big thing is we learned what we did wrong, and we changed it, whether it's our husbandry or getting healthier animals, whatever it happened to be, we fixed it so now we stopped having those problems again. So when it comes to the list of all the sick animals, I went off on a little tangent there for you.
That's okay.
Typical conversation for us.
Yeah.
So the types of things that we're seeing, we still see the metabolic bone disease, not as often as we used to, but it still does sneak in once in a while. The abscesses in the mouth and in the bones, again, not as often as we used to, but that's still happening. Respiratory infections, just the open mouth breathing, the clicks, those are still happening. Because there's more and more captive breeding being done, we're seeing less and less of the heavy parasite loads that we used to see back with the wild ones that were coming in. I remember back in the day we'd be doing those necropsies and we'd open up that body cavity. It would look like a big bowl of spaghetti. There were just so many worms filling up that whole body. We just don't see that with the captive raised animals.
Yeah, and that's good news. And so I know when I first bumped into you in the Long Beach Animal Hospital.
Long time ago.
That was because I had a chameleon with MBD. And I look back now and it's just, I cringe to think that was me. But yeah.
But so, that was the best we knew. We didn't have all the options of the lighting that we do now. And before you had the Vitalites, and that was it. That was our only UVB light bulb out there. And until they started doing all this research with the different companies that are now making better bulbs, and now the LED bulbs, we've got so many options that you can pick up at your local chain store even that was not available back 30 years ago. So
Yep.
we've got opportunities now to do it right so much easier than we did when we all first started.
Things have gotten so much better.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's learn a little bit more about you and your practice. Where's your office?
So my office, we're actually having our 15-year anniversary right now, is in Yorba Linda, California. It's called Greek and Associates Veterinary Hospital. We've got, a practice where we're seeing roughly 50% dogs and cats and roughly 50% exotics. Now, with that, the exotics can vary every single day. We get everything from fish to reptiles to ferrets. We've got one client that brings us camel in on a regular basis. So a little bit of everything. Diamond the camel. She's wonderful.
So, how did you get started with exotics? In a professional way?
So, as a kid, I got my first snake, gopher snake named Hercules, when I was 5 years old. So I had a fascination with reptiles forever, and pretty much always had at least a snake or two or a couple lizards from 5 till now. My own personal collection was probably at its biggest when I was still in vet school, where I had a couple hundred snakes and lizards as breeders, and then all the babies I produced every year. So it was a pretty big collection. And then once I graduated from school and I was working 12-hour days, 7 days a week, I wasn't able to give that collection the time that it really needed, so downsized a bunch. And so that's kind of been it. So pretty much my entire life, I've been keeping reptiles of some sort.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I absolutely love chameleons. I've owned a handful of chameleons, but to do it right, I just don't have the ability, just because of my schedule. So while I play with lots of chameleons at work, I haven't personally kept a lot, just to be completely honest with everybody. Instead, I've always been more of a gecko guy, because you can go away for a weekend and not have to worry about them too much. Where chameleons, you pretty much have to have somebody watch them all the time.
Well, I've kind of made it my personal responsibility to make sure you're exposed to as many species as possible over these last 30 years or wherever.
And I greatly appreciate that too. It's been a lot of fun.
I'll bring in a Brachysia. You'll say, well, haven't seen one of these. All right, let's do it.
And that's for those of us that love doing the exotics. It isn't like we've got a small handful of sizes. Say for a cat. For the cat vets, you got big cats, small cats, you got long hair, no hair, but that's about it for a cat vet. When you start doing the exotics, you've got hundreds and hundreds of different species. Just with the chameleons alone, you've got a couple hundred species. Now, they're not going to come in on a regular basis, but there's a really good chance that somebody who's a collector is going to get a hold of something that I personally have never seen before. And that's just the way it is. It's fun being in Southern California because there are so many people that keep reptiles out here. So I've had a chance to really get to see some neat stuff.
Yeah. So how is the reptile vet community growing?
There are, people with interest in reptiles all over the country. At our practice, we get senior vet students that come through to do exotic rotations, and we're probably seeing a half dozen new senior vet students each year. And I know of a lot of other places that are doing the same thing. A buddy of mine out in Arizona has some exotic-only practices. He's getting students coming through. So there are vets out there every single year that are graduating that want to learn these things, that love reptiles as much as we do. So they are out there. There are more and more all the time. There are never going to be enough. I right now could easily use one full-time doctor, maybe even 2 more at our practice. And because we see so many reptiles, yes, I would love to have somebody with that same interest. But there are more all the time, and so it's making it a little bit easier to find them.
Okay. So we'll go to that person that has a chameleon and is looking for the exotic vet and just cannot find one around them. So they found someone who's willing to work with that person. If they wanted to consult with you, what would the vet do? What would the client do to get that happening?
So a good example, as I mentioned earlier, was the veterinarian that was in Montana. The owner was unable to go anywhere else, but this veterinarian was really interested. She just didn't have the opportunity to do some of these things. So I was able to walk her through the procedures using techniques that she's done on a bunch of other species, but just how to do it on a chameleon. So when it comes to surgery, where to access things, how to anesthetize them, how to make sure they wake up again, how to close everything. These are all things that she's done in other species. It just takes a little tweaking and sometimes a little imagination on how to do it in the chameleon species. So I know me, my other veterinarians at my hospital, and a number of other veterinarians across the country are all there ready to help and willing to help with another veterinarian that wants to learn, wants to do this stuff.
Excellent. All right, Dr. Greek, this is a great introduction. Any final words for the person just starting off with chameleons?
Boy, really, it's do your research before you purchase your chameleon. Make sure that everything is set up perfectly before you get your chameleon. Have your veterinarian before you get your chameleon, and then be a fantastic observer. Watch those problems, catch them early, get them to us while we can still do something to fix it.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
I have known Dr. Tom Greek for decades. He's been my chameleon vet for, as long as I can remember. And I want to say it is hard to find a veterinarian that's good with chameleons. And so start your search now. And I'll tell you, once you find one, it is an amazing relationship. It's an amazing partnership that can benefit you and your chameleon in immeasurable ways. And so I hope this episode has made you comfortable with going and finding an exotics veterinarian that can serve you and your chameleon. Now, I recognize not every place has a veterinarian, and we talked about that. If that is your situation, then at least try to find a veterinarian that is willing to learn and is willing to call up other veterinarians to get advice as to how to grow their experience. And if they are willing to call another veterinarian, you now know Dr. Tom Greek is willing to help them. You can find his phone number by Googling Greek & Associates in Yorba Linda, California. And if you do love chameleons, I want to invite you to sign up for the Chameleon Academy newsletter. This is a newsletter that comes out at least monthly and has all sorts of information as to what's going on in the Chameleon Academy community. You can sign up by going to chameleonacademy.com and click the newsletter sign up, and you'll be added to the list. Thank you very much for joining me and Dr. Greek here. This is Bill Strand signing off, and I'll see you next time.